Tennessee Bend was a quiet valley where fog rolled in thick as sorrow and the air always smelled faintly of iron. The townsfolk said it came from old Caleb Turner's forge, though no one had seen it burn for near a century. Children whispered about it, the forge that burned without fire. To newcomers, it was superstition, but to the people born in that bend of the Cumberland River, it was a heartbeat, a pulse that hummed beneath the earth. In the late 1800s, that forge wasn't a myth, it was alive. And it belonged to Elias Turner, a blacksmith whose hands could bend steel yet trembled when holding his newborn son, Caleb. Elias was a man who believed iron had memory, that every strike of his hammer carried a piece of his soul, and maybe, in some strange way, it did. Elias's forge was more than a workshop, it was a sanctuary. Soldiers came for sabers, farmers for plows, and preachers for bells. He worked beside his wife, Mary, who polished each finished piece with a tenderness that softened the harsh clang of metal. When the war ended and poverty spread like smoke, Elias made a vow. This forge will never go cold while a soul in this town needs mending, whether it's a broken chain, a plow, or a heart. And so it stayed burning, not for gold or glory, but for people. The fire inside that forge glowed through nights of thunder, births, and funerals. But one winter of 1876, the fire began to die, and so did Elias. Snow fell heavy that winter, blanketing Tennessee Bend in silence. Elias grew ill, coughing up ash-colored blood. The forge that once roared seemed to breathe with him, each gust of wind through the chimney echoing his shallow breaths. On the night he passed, Mary sat beside him. He whispered, "If the fire dies, promise me it'll live on in another way. Promise me, Mary." Tears froze on her cheeks as she nodded. By dawn, Elias was gone. The forge's flames flickered, danced, then dimmed. Yet, when townsfolk came to mourn, they swore the iron walls still radiated warmth, and the anvil, Elias's favorite, was warm to the touch, as if the fire had gone somewhere else. Caleb Turner was only 12 when his father died. He wasn't strong enough to swing a hammer, but every night he'd sneak into the forge and sit beside the anvil. He claimed he could hear it sing. It wasn't a melody but a hum, like a low heartbeat that pulsed through the walls. Sometimes he thought he heard words in it. Keep shaping, keep believing. Mary thought grief had made her boy imagine things, but the warmth never left the forge. Even in the dead of winter. In spring, a stranger arrived, a man with burned hands and sorrow in his eyes. He said little, only that he'd been a blacksmith too, before the war took his family and his flame. Caleb watched the man from behind the forge door as he placed his hands on the anvil and whispered a prayer. Later, Mary offered him bread. He refused but left behind a single coal, wrapped in cloth. "It's for the boy," he said. "He'll know what to do." When Caleb unwrapped it, the coal wasn't hot. But when he held it to his chest, he swore he felt it beating. Years passed. The forge never burned again, not in the way it used to. But anyone who walked by felt a faint warmth, especially at dusk. Caleb grew taller, stronger, and lonelier. He worked small repairs for the town, not with fire, but with patience. He could mend metal with heatless tools and hard faith. Then one night, lightning struck the old oak near the forge. Flames licked the roof, but never caught. Instead, the anvil began to glow softly, like a lantern under water. People came running, expecting a blaze. But there was no smoke, no scent of burning, just a warm golden light filling the room, and Caleb, standing beside it, whispering his father's words, "Keep shaping, keep believing." After that night, everything Caleb forged seemed different. A plow he made for Old Man Gibson lasted 20 years longer than any other. A bell he shaped for the chapel never cracked, even through storms. Folks said his forge had God's breath in it. Caleb only said, "It's just my father's promise." But there was more. The glow never faded. The anvil and walls held a constant silent warmth, a reminder that Elias Turner's forge had never truly gone cold. Soon travelers from far towns came to see it, not for its tools but its light. One night, a widow named Anna Beth brought a broken locket. It had belonged to her husband, lost at sea. She asked Caleb if he could fix it, not because she needed it, but because she needed to believe it could be whole again. Caleb melted no metal that night. He simply placed the locket on the glowing anvil, whispered something only the walls could hear, and pressed it closed. When he handed it back, Annabeth gasped. The hinge was perfect. The photo inside, once water-stained, was clear again. Word spread. They said the forge didn't just fix iron, it healed hearts. By 1889, Tennessee Bend had changed. The church bell sang clearer, tools lasted longer, and the people carried a quiet kind of hope. Some said it was coincidence. Others called it Turner's blessing. Children played near the forge, feeling its warmth through winter gloves. Travelers knelt before it, as though it were an altar. But Caleb grew weary. Each miracle seemed to draw more from him. Like the forge's warmth fed on his spirit. He often sat alone, whispering to the glow, "Father, am I the fire now?" The forge hummed softly in reply. On his 40th birthday, Caleb woke to find frost thick on every window, except the forge. Its light shone brighter than ever before. He felt weak but peaceful, as if something inside him had reached its end. He entered the forge, touched the anvil, and whispered, "If the fire ever fades, let it burn where it's needed most." That night, the glow spread through the town, through iron fences, church bells, and plow blades. Everything Elias and Caleb had ever touched seemed to shimmer faintly with light. By morning, the forge was cold for the first time in 100 years. Caleb was gone. Yet, in the heart of Tennessee Bend, nothing ever rusted again. After Caleb Turner's passing, Tennessee Bend fell into a strange stillness. For the first time in 100 years, the forge no longer glowed. The air grew cooler, the iron smell faded, and the town felt emptier, as though something sacred had finally gone to sleep. Mary Turner had long passed, and Caleb left behind no wife, no children, only his tools, the warm anvil, and a town forever changed. Yet even in the silence there were whispers. Blacksmiths from nearby counties claimed that when they struck metal, they could hear an echoing hum, faint like a distant bell. They called it Turner's Song. And though the forge no longer burned, the people of Tennessee Bend knew something of it still lived beneath the earth. By 1905, a new blacksmith named Thomas Reed bought the Turner property. He was a widower with a daughter named Lydia, who was 9 and loved to draw horses in the soot on the forge walls. Thomas was a practical man. He didn't believe in ghost stories. But when he tried to light the forge's hearth, the coals wouldn't burn. No smoke, no heat, just cold metal and silence. Until one day, Lydia placed her small hand on the anvil and whispered, "Papa says fire needs wood, but maybe this one just needs love." That evening, Thomas found the forge faintly warm, not burning, not glowing, but softly breathing. He didn't tell anyone, but he began to believe the stories were true. Years later, Lydia discovered something while helping her father repair the old brickwork. A folded letter sealed inside the wall with soot-black fingerprints on it. It was from Caleb Turner. It read, "To whoever finds this, fire dies in a hearth when it runs out of breath. But a forge's flame is not born from wood or wind. It lives in the hands of those who build, mend, and love what they create. If you keep shaping goodness into the world, the forge will burn again, not with fire, but with faith. Thomas cried reading it. And from that day, the forge in Tennessee Bend never smoked again, but it always stayed warm enough to work, no matter how cold the winter. When the Great War came, Thomas forged horseshoes and tools for the soldiers. He never took payment. The Turners didn't, he'd say, and neither will I. The forge became a refuge. Young men wrote letters home by its warmth. Mothers left prayers on the anvil, asking that their sons return. And though many didn't, the town survived. The warmth of the forge never failed. Even as the world outside grew darker, Lydia grew up, married, and had a son named Samuel. But when she grew old, she confessed something to him. When I was little, I saw sparks in the air, tiny ones like fireflies, whenever Papa worked at the forge. But he said there was no fire. Maybe it was something else. Maybe it was love made visible. Samuel laughed at the time, but years later he'd remember those words, especially when his own daughter would see the same thing. Because the forge never truly went dark. It just waited. By 1972, the Reed family were the only ones left tending the Turner forge. Samuel was old, his hands rough, his back bent. The world had moved on, machines had taken over, and blacksmiths were relics of the past. When a historian from Nashville came to document the forge's legacy, Samuel said, "This place burned 100 years without a flame. You tell me how that's possible." The historian smiled politely, thinking it just a tale. But when he touched the anvil, he jerked back. It was warm. He left speechless. That night, Samuel walked into the forge one last time. He whispered to the darkness, "I'm the last one left, but I reckon you already know that." And for the first time in decades, he swore he heard a low hum, soft, familiar, like the sound of a heartbeat under steel. After Samuel's death, the forge was locked up. Weeds grew through the cracks, the river flooded, and Tennessee Bend became a quiet ghost town, the kind forgotten by time but remembered in rumors. Some locals said they'd see a faint orange glow on foggy nights near the Turner property. Others claimed to hear hammering, slow, rhythmic, echoing through the hills. But no one dared go close. Until one day, a century later, a college student named Ellie Turner, a descendant of Elias's brother, came to Tennessee Bend for a photography project titled Forgotten Fires. She had never heard of the forge, but when she arrived, the smell of iron in the air made her heart race, as if her blood remembered what her mind could not. The forge stood in ruins, ivy on the walls, roof half collapsed, the anvil rusted black. Ellie brushed the dust from it and found a single marking carved faintly beneath. "Keep shaping, keep believing." Her camera flashed, and the photo came out strangely. The background was dark, but the anvil glowed faintly gold in the image. That night, she couldn't sleep. Drawn by something deeper than curiosity, she returned at midnight and laid her hand on the anvil. It was warm. Not just warm, pulsing, like a heartbeat. And for a brief, terrifying, beautiful moment, she heard a whisper in the dark. "Welcome home, Turner." Ellie spent the next few days restoring the forge piece by piece. She replaced bricks, scrubbed rust, and cleared debris. She didn't know why. It just felt right. On the final day, rain poured hard. Thunder rolled over the valley, echoing like distant hammer strikes. When lightning struck the old oak outside, the same one from Caleb's time, the forge flared to life, not with flame, but with light. Golden threads of energy rippled through the air, illuminating tools that hadn't been touched in 100 years. Ellie stood frozen as the warmth surrounded her. She could see faint outlines of men working. Elias, Caleb, Thomas, generations of blacksmiths, their hands glowing as they struck invisible metal. And then she heard her great ancestor's voice, steady and kind. The fire was never in the wood, child. It was always in the heart. The light faded, leaving behind silence and the soft hum of life returning. A year later, Tennessee Bend was reborn. Ellie reopened the forge, not as a workshop, but as a memorial and learning center for craftsmen and dreamers. Visitors said it felt alive. The tools stayed warm. The anvil hummed faintly, and on quiet evenings, the golden glow returned just long enough to light the room. Ellie placed a plaque above the door, dedicated to those who build, mend, and believe, for their fire never dies. One old woman who visited whispered, "It's a miracle." Ellie smiled gently and replied, "No, it's a memory, a promise kept." And as she spoke, the faint hum returned, deep and steady, like the beating heart of a forge that had never truly gone cold. Because in Tennessee Bend, the blacksmith's fire still burned, not in the hearth, but in every soul who believed that what's made with love can never be lost.